We're all set.
Okay, great. The recording just turned on. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Erin Lush, and I would like to take an opportunity to introduce our speakers for the day. Liz Barnaby spoke first, and we'll have Tim Burke, who is our Executive Director for the Office of Travel, Employee Relocation, Transportation, and is our government-wide executive category. Our government-wide category executive for travel. I'll be speaking next. My name is Erin Lush, and I'm the Contracting Officer of Record for ETSNext Generation. Up next, we'll have Ryan Edelstein, who is our Program Manager for ETSNext Generation. And then next, we'll have Mike Salter, who is our Program Analyst for the FBIF API standards, along with Finance and TMC Services. And then finally, we'll have Tae Kim, who is our Information Systems Security Officer for ETSNext. Additionally, there are several other team members within PMO and QMA that have taken the time to work hard on providing the eGov travel services. And I'd like to take an opportunity to thank them. Just 1 second, exit full screen. So our agenda today, if you want to go to the next slide. Our agenda today will cover the ETSNext with the background, our market research overview, and then we'll shift into the T&E business standards. And then next we'll delve into the organization of the request for proposals. Then from there, we'll go to the organization to the RFP and any changes. We'll next go over TMC changes and then wrap up with our information systems security. And then finally, if we haven't answered any of your questions throughout the life of this pre-proposal conference, we'll do a exiting question submissions update. We do plan on allowing the industry to ask questions throughout each segment. So once we hit the end of segment for a particular slide, we'll open it up to the industry to ask any questions. Again, we'll repeat questions in chat, and then if we can't answer them right away, we'll go ahead and provide the answers. However, if we can't answer it, we'll acknowledge that we'll take the question and then come back and answer it formally via the question and answers submission. Please note that the questions have extended to December the 12th at 11 p.m. We did have original cutoff date for November the 15th, but we did extend that due to the amendments of the solicitation. So that is now December the 12th at 11 p.m. Okay, so with that said, I would like to turn it over to our Executive Director and Government Category Executive, Tim Burke. Tim?
Well, thank you, Erin. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I see 100+ people are on the video meeting today, so welcome again. With deep appreciation, I'm representing the government's voice to this across the entire space, the executive branch for sure, the policy side of the government that has looked and strived very hard for decades to look at how to move standardization more to more efficient delivery of administrative products across the federal government. I'm sort of proud to be around this team on many reasons, but just to touch on it, industry's engagement with us over the many, many years, a couple of decades from my perspective, when it comes to the travel and expense solution. You've worked pretty darn hard to, number one, to the current vendors and the previous vendors that have launched the experiment from eGov travel to where it is today, to the delivery model for shared services and getting to a modernized technology platform that is going to be focused on the efforts of making it an ease of use. There's a little line that we've used from time to time that when ETSNext is successfully fully launched and deployed, not everyone stays at every federal agency for their entire federal career, but they should be able to move from one agency to the next and be able to do their travel consistently and predictably and with the ease of use. We have these within our reach by moving to this design, this strategy, and this engagement, and we are grateful for industry's input in helping us craft the requirements. And what we hope for is a strategic, competitive path forward for all of you. The team has worked very hard with our customer base. The federal agencies that are on here, I can't say enough about them and the work that they've done. I can't say enough about the Office of Management and Budget, the Office of Government-Wide Policy, the Office of Shared Services Performance Improvement, Shared Service Governance Board, the Federal Acquisition Service, GSA. It has been a tremendous effort in the making over, as I said, a couple of decades, but really the focus over the last couple of years, and the team that you've had the good fortune to work with, and I've been able to serve every day, is I'm very excited about today. The outcomes of a shared service delivery model, most of you all know, you probably practiced in your corporate world for many, many decades. Efficiency, effectiveness, eliminating duplication, all those things are really cool terms. They are effective when it is executed in a way that those things are achieved. Without the standardization associated with the governing model around the business standards that have been created, the Federal Integrated Business Framework, we would not be able to delve this confidently into this type of solution and delivery model. So I think it's the most exciting time that I've seen since I've been in government, where we've all come together on something that was a little far-reaching to start, but we're at the cusp of being in a very competitive environment. With that said, we have tremendous support from the Office of Management and Budget. That's going to continue as long as the program team gets from industry what it looks like we're all excited about it getting. And so we're on schedule. The calendar looks good. The budget process is starting to take place. So we're very comfortable and confident about that. But I will say that the competitive bidding process will be the pivot point for this. And so I encourage industry to get the tough questions into us that you think haven't been answered to date. I think December 12th is the target date we have for it, if I heard Liz and Aaron correctly. So we welcome that. I look forward to the remainder of this session today, but I'm available for any questions, Aaron and Ryan, as they move forward. But I'll turn it to you, Ryan, and wish everybody a very successful meeting. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Tim. Welcome, everybody. I'm Ryan Edelstein with the ETSNext project team. Thanks in advance for your time today and all of your interest and input up to this point. Really appreciate it. Just to brag a little bit on Tim's behalf, a little bit more. So the eGov Travel Service, ETS, has been a highly effective and successful program coming out of the eGov initiative of an act of 2002. ETS, the eGov Travel Service, it's a mandatory use program, began with the original ETS contract 20 years ago. And then we moved to the ETS2, our current contract, which expires in 2027. Throughout this lifespan, ETS has successfully brought government travel online onto a single contract and reduced travel and reimbursement time from what used to be upwards of a month or more to typically 72 hours or less. So huge strides for this program over the 20 plus years. In that time, travel industry technology options for travelers have evolved and expanded, and of course, shaken up quite a bit with COVID. So what we're looking at here with ETS2 contract expiring in 2027, we have huge opportunity and responsibility to ensure that this next generation of ETS continues to meet agency mission needs through more streamlined, modern travel and expense experience that is prepared to grow and continue to respond to emerging trends in the industry. And you can, thanks, switch over to the next slide there. So our market research has clearly indicated that a centralized managed travel and expense service will deliver the best value and best experience to government travelers and other stakeholders. And to help us execute our mission to provide a travel and expense shared service that supports the missions of government, is intuitive, is secure, provides a predictable path for agencies to transition under our mantra of do no harm. Let's go to the next slide. So to help us execute this vision, we are seeking a travel and expense managed service provider with a clear forward-leaning roadmap for continuous travel and expense service improvement. This is for our agency travel offices, our customer agency partners, their travelers, travel arrangers, and approvers. These are the key roles here. So a couple key areas that we're looking at. So we're seeking this managed service that will provide single centralized travel and expense service. It's based on our travel and expense business standards. I'll talk a little bit more about those if you're not already familiar. This is going to provide that standardized experience with some customizations, limited customizations where agency mission needs come into play. But this is the vision that Tim mentioned of a federal employee who works at one agency and then gets a job at a different agency. They shouldn't have to relearn a brand new travel system. They should be able to step in with some minor variations, but really recognize that travel system. Another big area of improvement opportunity for government-wide really is the data. So fundamentally today we have some challenges with the siloed approach, with different implementations across government. We do struggle with government-wide consistent quality and consistency of data formatting. So that's a benefit that we're looking to really make advances in and be able to have better, more standardized government-wide reporting, and to be able to make smarter decisions about travel for government. This managed service provider that we're looking for really must also prioritize the user experience. So federal travelers shouldn't have to be experts in federal travel policy. They all have missions that they need to carry out. So we're looking for a service that makes it easy for travelers to make smart, policy compliant travel decisions so that they can quickly get back to their mission work. And that experience must be accessible for all travelers using all devices, desktop, laptop, mobile. We're looking for a managed service provider that can leverage modern cloud-based technologies to improve and standardize our approach to information security management. And Tay will talk a little bit more about security requirements later on. We see huge opportunities to automate manual steps. Of course, we're looking for ways to apply artificial intelligence in a smart way, reduce duplication of work across government. And it's, one of the benefits that we see in a shared service environment is when one agency has a good idea for a process improvement or a user experience enhancement, and they put the effort into that. With a shared service environment, we want to be able to deploy that good idea and make it available for other agencies to leverage those same capabilities. Next slide, please. Okay, travel and expense business standards. You may hear the acronym, you will hear the acronym FIBIF, Federal Integrated Business Framework, sort of interchangeable with the T&E business standards. So let's go to the next slide. So shortly after the current ETS2 contract was in place, we began to look at ways to improve usability, overall customer experience. It became clear early on market research and input from our agencies that government must standardize our travel and expense processes and requirements if we want to be better positioned to leverage more modern, more commercial tools to deliver that better user experience. So in response to that, GSA kicked off and led a government-wide process, that's the Federal Integrated Business Framework, FIBIF, to define these travel and expense business standards and processes and data standards. So with government-wide buy-in, we have OMB approval of these standards, and recently eGov Travel Service, ETS, was designated an existing shared service provider. So we're now really uniquely positioned to bring this common set of requirements, government-wide requirements to industry, and bring that challenge to deliver the next generation of the eGov Travel Service. So to this point, agencies have not been required to implement these new business standards under ETS2, but have agreed to apply those standards with ETSNext. So when we say earlier our mantra is do no harm, that doesn't mean no change. And we've been talking to agencies quite a bit about this. We have been working with our customer agencies to understand their current configurations, their current policies, and to be able to come to agreement on a single set of configurations, or at least a few options that we would make available in ETSNext based on these T&E standards. So knowing configuration options will vary with different solutions and different technologies. Our focus is not on prescribing the solution, but on standardizing the business needs, the business processes and outcomes, so that our eventual awarded vendor can help map those to the solution. Things that we're doing to get our customer agencies ready for this big shift. We've been holding regular bi-weekly meetings for months now, over a year really, meeting with agencies. We've got high participation, high interest, high engagement, and several agencies have already raised their hand to volunteer and say, we want to be early adopters with this. So we're excited and happy with that level of engagement so far. We've been talking with our customer agencies about this new shared service delivery model, getting their input and feedback on the design and approach. And a lot of that was reflected in the RFP in terms of roles and the governance structure that we're thinking about. We've spent a fair amount of time talking to our customer agencies about how this business model is going to change. So instead of today, agencies have separately awarded task orders with agencies paying ETS vendor and a contract access fee going to GSA. Under ETSNext, GSA will manage this single award with agencies paying GSA a service access fee based on their usage. We see that we would establish these sort of essentially contracts between government agencies, interagency agreements, we call them IAAs. So we would use those IAA agreements between GSA and our customer agencies to define our service terms and establish a consumption-based fee for agencies. So these are just some of the examples of the work that's underway to help really shorten the ramp-up period after award for the awarded vendor, and to let you know a little bit about what we're doing to get agencies on board, ready to roll up their sleeves, ready to hit the ground running. Okay, next slide. And I think I'll hand it over to Erin here.
Yes, hi. So now we're going to shift into the request for proposal section, which is better known as the RFP. If you notice, if you go to the next slide, please. If you notice parts 1, sections B and C, part 3, section J, part 4, sections L and M are highlighted. So these will be the items that we're going to focus particularly on today. If we do have time during the Q&A session and industry wants to look at other sections, we'll address that at the end. But these are the main sections that we feel would be beneficial to deeper dive into. So with that said, we'll go ahead and go to the next slide, and I'll turn it back over to Ryan to discuss section B.
Okay, thanks, Erin. And I guess just to the team, if there's chats going on, I've got too many windows on the screen, so holler out somebody on our team.
Ryan, I'll call out when there's a question.
Perfect.
Because I have the chat window open. So
great. Okay, thank you. Okay, we're the government. We love acronyms, so let's do some more acronyms here. We've got CLINs, and so these are contract line item numbers. So if we're talking about pricing, that's the unit of service delivery really that's defined in the beginning of the RFP. So I wanted to start there and actually start sort of in the middle with CLIN number 3. So CLIN number 3, the T&E managed service implementation. So this is really all the work that is required to launch the full managed service that would support all of our current ETS2 customer agencies and their current travel and expense needs. This work is described in section C 2.3, includes all of the solution, design, and build and configuration work, including API services, security authorization, agency transition, support, and training. So this is big. This is fixed price CLIN. We expect this to be completed in that base 3-year period. This CLIN does show up in option periods, and this is to cover in the event that there are additional implementations required for potentially new customer agencies that may come on board later in the contract. So CLINs 1 and 2, also fixed price. These are units of fully loaded travel and expense managed service transactions. So these include everything that's described in service management, that's section 2.1, service strategy 2.2, and service delivery 2.4. So everything that's required to run this managed service, from travel authorizations, reservations, vouchers, that standard travel and expense workflow, includes reporting, API operation enhancements, security, user support, et cetera. So it's what you might be familiar with, the O&M to run that managed service. But important to note, this is not just technology, this is the full managed service operation. So the transactions, the managed service transactions, the unit, it's defined in this section, in this section B. We did, in response to some questions that we got, amend that section earlier this week and added some examples to better explain what counts as a billable transaction. Generally, refer to that language, but generally the transaction fee would be billable whenever a voucher is approved for reimbursement. CLIN 1 is priced based on an annual volume of up to 3 million transactions, and then CLIN 2 would be priced at an annual volume above 3 million, so kind of two bands. So our current ETS2 customer volume would fit into that first band. We're looking at about 2.7 million annual volume right now. So that CLIN 2 provides pricing if the volume continues to grow and or if we expand with new customer agencies.
So Ryan, I want to go ahead and take an opportunity here while we're talking about CLINs 1 and CLIN 2 and identify that there may be an upcoming change to the period of performance for CLIN 1 and CLIN 2. We are actually reviewing the possible change in the period of performances for each option period, not the base. So currently we have 4 3-year option periods, and we are looking at a potential to possibly change to 12 1-year option periods. And that would better align the contract with the intent to pay for the transactions that occurred related to annual agency reimbursement processes. So it's not set in stone yet, but we do want to let the industry know that we are entertaining a review for this potential period of performance change. But right now it is business as usual. But if the industry does have any questions or comments surrounding this possible change for the option periods going from 4 3 years to 12 1 year, please submit a comment or a question to myself and onthego@gsa.gov, and we'd be happy to address that. Thanks, Ryan.
Right. Okay. So that's, as I was talking before about the IAAs, the interagency agreements. So that, as Aaron was mentioning, that potential change to move to 1-year option periods would better align with that. Those interagency agreements are also 1 year. Okay. So back to how we would price, because this is some other questions that we got around how would we price those transactional CLINs. So for evaluation purposes, we are going to use quantities of 2 million transactions for that base 3-year period, and then 8.1 million transactions for each 3-year option period. So these are not guarantees, these are not promises, these are rough estimates that we would use for price evaluation purposes, because I think it's obvious you can't just price out a single unit of transaction and compare. So that's our best estimate of what how we see that ramp up looking. So I think in that 3-year base period, it's worth noting that we're expecting that in the first 9 to 12 months of that base period, there will be the setup work, the security work, before that first transaction. That would likely be the earliest that first transaction before CLIN 1 would be used. So if we model out that phased ramp up rate, and we're also looking at the rate of with ETS2, the rate that agencies onboarded. So that comes out to about 2 million transactions in that first 3-year base. So again, not a guarantee, but maybe helpful for your purposes as you think about planning. So at the bottom of this slide here, you can see one potential approach that we're looking at to phase our agencies onboarding in that implementation approach. So this has been shared with our customer agencies. We're still getting feedback. This will change, but just wanted to, in the interest of transparency, share what we're looking at so far and for estimating purposes. So you see here the more acronyms, we love those, IOC and FOC. So the IOC would be our early adopter agencies, the first phase, initial operating capability agencies, excuse me. And so they have volunteered and want to work with us to go first. We're already working very closely with these agencies to prepare for that first phase. But you can see here, we would be starting relatively small. Collectively, that group of IOC agencies, there are 3. They would make up about 3% of the total eventual annual transaction volume, about 91,000 transactions. FOC period, the full operating capability, the rest of the agencies would be broken into three tranches or three groups. So the first phase of agencies would be about 500,000 transactions representing 18%, and so on, with the second group about 30%. And that last group in phase 3 would be close to 50%. We're doing our best to group agencies around similar travel needs, which would lead to similar types of configuration settings. But we'll also absolutely want to get the awarded vendors' input after award to make sure that we take into account different, uniquenesses with solutions and services proposed. Going back up to CLIN number 4. So CLIN number 4 is our custom requirements and enhancements CLIN. So CLIN number 1 and 2, the managed service transactions, it does include some capacity for improvements and enhancements. But we anticipate that there will be larger enhancements beyond the capacity that's accounted for in CLIN 1 or 2. So with CLIN number 4, we're looking for an approach to an iterative or an agile team that defines a unit of incremental work, typically known as a sprint, and what that team composition would look like, what the duration of work would be. And important to note, these are going to be apples and oranges or different varieties of apples, but pricing is going to be evaluated as fair and reasonable only and not used in the overall price evaluation. So we'll take into account a recognition of, does the vendor understand the overall scope of an approach for the travel expense solution, and does the team that would be proposed have an approach that reflects that understanding?
Okay, so Ryan, we do have a question on CLIN 4. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so will agencies order directly off the ETSNext contract for custom requirements work they need?
No. We will have a governance process in place. The GSA will own that governance process and operation, and GSA will be the sole agency that would award any of these CLINs, but including the optional CLIN 4. And along those lines, so before exercising optional CLIN 4, it would go through our governance process if we have an agency that is requesting something, and that's partly where we need this managed service provider's help in that operation of the governance, in terms of what are the impacts of a proposed enhancement, both technologically, change management process, and what does cost look like. So before we exercise a CLIN 4, we would have mutual agreement with the awarded vendor on the number of those units of incremental work, the number of sprints that would be required, and what that scope looks like.
And Tim did put a comment in the chat that says this is where the business standards will help the agency get what they need.
Yeah. So CLIN 5, travel, somewhat ironically, we don't expect a lot of travel with this contract. Sort of the where we are in the world today, where most things are done virtually. Much of government is still heavily virtual and online, although some travel may be required, and so that CLIN is in here for that as needed.
Yeah, and let me speak on that CLIN. So we're going to probably put about $5,000 on this CLIN each base period and option period, which will not get invoiced unless we actually utilize it, and it'll be a cost reimbursement type where you would where the awarded vendor would actually have to submit their receipts, and then we would allow that to occur. But I mean, again, we don't evaluate this CLIN for the total evaluated price, but we do have it in accordance with our agency rules and procedures. All right, thanks, Ryan.
Okay, unless you have anything else to add, Aaron, I am good with this slide.
Nope, I'm great. Before we move on, does the industry have any questions regarding Section B? Okay, so we have a question. So agencies will use a different contract to do any integration work needed.
Okay, presumably referring to integration with their financial management systems. And so this is an important point. So the scope of the ETSNext, the managed service contract, would be to stand up an API interface and operate and maintain that API interface that customer agencies would be responsible for connecting to. So typically agencies either already have contractor support underway, or would initiate a new support contract for that interface work. So hopefully that answers your question.
That did, thank you. All right, do we have any other questions before we move to section C? All right, Tim did want to ask follow on this integration work. He says, but clearly not part of the ETS contract, right?
Correct.
Correct. Okay. All right. I do not see any additional questions for this section, so let's go ahead and move forward to Ryan to section C.
Okay, great. So section C there's a lot going on in section C. So this is obviously the performance work statement, describes the work that's required under those CLINs that we just talked about. So we've had a fair number of questions about roles and responsibilities between GSA and other agencies and the eventual awarded vendor. So this section does include some tables and visuals that hopefully help describe and delineate how we're seeing those roles complement each other. So this green, blue, red visual here lays out three major areas, sort of different ways to slice and dice this, but how we're looking at it is service strategy, service delivery, and service management. And those are sort of the verticals there. And then the horizontals are each of GSA as the shared service provider, vendor as the managed service layer, and our customer agencies each have a role in those verticals. So overall, as we look at service strategy, so this is really about customer experience optimization, that idea of continuous improvement and governance support. So it's critical for us to have a managed service provider that is able to prioritize continuous improvement of that user experience and customer experience. And when we talk about UX and CX, there's sort of those two layers of user experience is at the typically the traveler, but also the traveler arranger and approvers, where our customer experience are the agency travel offices that are representing their agency travel needs, and they're going to have different requirements. So both those levels are important to make sure that those stakeholder groups are considered. So in this area under service strategy, we're looking for a managed service provider who's going to bring key roles like technical lead who can be that solution architect, a design lead who can really sit above operations and help partner with us to look at the user feedback data, to look at actual system usage data, and help us be proactive about what enhancements are going to bring the best impact for users in our customer agencies as well. I think I said this before, but just to reiterate, GSA, we will own the governance. So we need our managed service provider to bring recommendations into that governance process, to be the expert to help us with impact analysis of potential changes. But GSA will lead the governance operation, will be responsible for agency participation and the outcomes of that governance process. We also had a few questions about how we were using the term roadmap. Recognize that we'll likely see commercial-based solutions that will have their own product roadmap. In addition to that commercial product roadmap, we're going to need a service roadmap that is, incorporates planned enhancements on that commercial roadmap, but also incorporates things that are beyond just the technology changes and improvements that are coming, whether it's the contact support, help desk support function, other changes on that service roadmap. So that's where we need, under that service strategy, help maintaining that service roadmap. The middle column here, service delivery. So these are all things implementation and after implementation, that operational support. So that's everything from security to the API, implementation and management, obviously the full travel and expense functionality, enhancements delivery, reporting, supporting TMC setup and integration. Government owns the standard configuration decisions. As the GSA shared service provider, we'll be responsible for using that governance process to get our agencies aligned on those standard configurations. Government will also provide the input on prioritization of enhancements, what's most important for us to implement, and also responsible for defining the acceptance criteria. How do we know when those enhancements are done? Government will also be responsible to make sure that we've got the right testers involved, to make sure that we've got testers who are representative of what those enhancements, the type of user that they would impact. On the service management column, so this is more the project and program management administration, the contract performance reporting, contract administration activities. So I think I covered the main points here. Any questions or anything that you wanted to add, Erin?
No, I think you did a great job covering section C. Does the industry have any questions that they'd like to come off mute or put in chat? We actually just received one. Sorry, I did not ask this earlier. The volumes on the previous slide appear to represent the top level of travel volume. Given the reduction in the government travel as mentioned on this call, aka the COVID period that we had reduced travel, do you have any estimates on a minimum level of travel?
Okay, great. So while we're not guaranteeing a minimum, I mean, I think I can say that our travel levels are essentially back to, we're sort of back on track to pre-COVID levels. So I think early in the RFP, we have a table that shows our projections, and I don't have that in front of me, but I believe we showed for FY24, 2.7 million transactions across our current civilian ETS2 user base.
Yes. Okay, he said thank you. All right, do we have any other questions on section C or section B before we move forward? You can also come off mute and ask your question there.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and move forward to the next section. Okay, so here is part 3, which is section J, list of attachments. To date, this is a list of all the attachments that support ETSNext. Now, I know it's not a lot, totally joking, but the bolded items J1, J10, J19-2, and 19-3 are bolded, and behind it, they have updates as of November the 9th, 2023 via solicitation amendment A1. So if you do not have a copy of this, please see sam.gov for those updated attachments. And then the bolded items J3 and J-19.1 all have updates as of December the 4th, 2023 via solicitation amendment A2. So please also see sam.gov for those updated attachments. These are updates that are in response to the questions that were provided by the industry that were due on November the 15th. So we did review questions and then provide updates to clarify and respond. Just want to note that all vendors who have completed their CUI, controlled unclassified information request cover letter, and sent that over to me with a copy to onthego@gsa.gov, and also have had an active compliant SAM registration, they did receive the CUI attachments separately with password encrypted zip files because they're not publicly available. They're controlled unclassified information. So if you have not received these CUI documents, it is because I do not have a SAM cover letter from you or an active SAM registration. You've sent me your cover letter, but your SAM entity is not active in the system, so I can't verify if you have met your compliance checks. So if you have not received your CUI files and you want them, you will need to send me a cover letter to aaron.lush@gsa.gov and a copy to onthego@gsa.gov with a cover letter that includes your business information, which also has your SAM UEI, unique entity identification number. And then I'll do a SAM compliance check and then send you the CUI attachments. So most of these attachments are self-explanatory. However, there is one attachment that we're going to deeper dive into, and that is attachment J3, which is the requirements traceability matrix. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and go to the next slide. And Ryan, if you could talk briefly to that, and then I'll share my my screen for the requirements traceability matrix.
Sure. Okay. So thanks to everybody who's asked good questions so far, submitted good questions. So we've already issued an amendment earlier this week that has some updates to the RTM. And I think we'll show a few of those, and they are all highlighted in red in the latest posting in SAM.gov. But some updates to the table of contents to better explain how we're looking at some of the data elements, and another acronym, the BIE, the Business Information Exchange. So we wanted to clarify that a lot of those data fields have come from customer agencies who have said, essentially, we think we need this data field. So they're in sort of a queue where we'll need vendor input to, the awarded vendors input to go through those with the customer agency and determine if and how to implement those fields. So several of those data fields, those data elements in the RTM were moved over to the FOC category, meaning they can move out to later in implementation. Updates around security and reporting. So let me back up a minute and say sort of what's an RTM. So hopefully you're
Do you
a little
mind,
bit familiar.
do you mind, Liz, if you can let me share my screen, if you could stop presenting, then I'll present my screen. It won't let me until you stop.
Yep.
Thank you. Awesome. All right. So let me go ahead and share my screen.
So the RTM, requirements traceability matrix. So this is really our full list of functional, non-functional system requirements related to this overall managed travel and expense solution. So we know it's certainly not all about technology, but there will be a core component of technology in this solution. So we talked about the travel and expense standards earlier and the FIBIF process to create those standards. So most of these requirements are really derived from those business standards, and they're in the terminology of business requirements. And what we'll be looking to do with the awarded vendor immediately after award is get to work on how do we sort of translate these into the more detailed system user stories, if you're familiar with that approach. A little way to get around in a guided tour of the RTM file, because there's a lot going on here. With each tab, they correspond generally to major sections of the travel and expense user workflow, if you will. So from authorization to ticketing and reservation and vouchering, in addition to some other tabs that focus on technology and security and data. But the column structure is the same throughout. So column F is an important one to start with. So column F indicates when that requirement is sort of due, is required in the process. So whether it's required as part of our evaluation process, will we be looking at that requirement at evaluation, or will it be required to be delivered by the end of IOC phase or by the end of FOC, which is essentially end of implementation. So column F is used to indicate the deadline for those requirements. So column G, H, and I are to be filled out as part of proposal. So column G is, what's the status of this requirement in your solution today? And you select one of those choices. And then column H is, if it's not ready today, when will it be ready on your roadmap? And that's an opportunity for you to indicate, I think it's, or will it be ready, I'm sorry, by the required phase in column F. So if in column F, we're saying it needs to be ready by FOC, and you may say, well, it's ready now, great. And then in column H, you would say, yes, it'll be ready by FOC. And then of course, column I is an opportunity for comments to add any kind of clarification there. And then I think we have some examples over in the data tab, Aaron, of updates. So just want to kind of highlight to make sure hopefully it's obvious, but the red here is used to indicate that this was changed from our initial RFP that was posted on the 20th. And I mentioned a number of these data elements. I think a lot of these were marked as NA when really no was more appropriate in terms of, are these data elements going to be required for the FM interface?
Right, I moved you over to the security tab that has more updates where
Okay.
you can see. Yeah.
Great. So again, more examples, just hopefully to make it easy to quickly see what's changed. And a lot of this was driven by, good questions that came in. Any questions?
Yeah, any questions before we move off the RTM and go into the subsequent sections of the RFP? Okay, I will stop sharing my screen and we can have Liz go ahead and reshare your screen and we'll keep
Sorry,
moving.
just a moment. I got it. Yep,
Thank you.
we should be back. Can you see it?
Yes.
Perfect, thanks.
Okay. Since we don't have any questions, we'll go ahead and move on to section L. Okay, so section L is a very important section of the RFP. It is what is known as the instructions for offerers. So this is what the industry needs to know to submit their volumes. So this solicitation will be conducted as an advisory multi-phase evaluation. So interested parties, you will submit your phase 1, volumes 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to me, aaron.lush@gsa.gov, with a copy to onthego@gsa.gov, no later than 2300 hours Eastern Standard Time on January the 31st, 2024. So we have the 5 volumes in phase 1, and they are broken out as follows. Volume 1 is the T&E Technology Managed Service description. I would like to point out that volume 1 has a limitation of 30 pages. We did an update in solicitation amendment 2 that did add a pitch point size for graphics and images, and that pitch point size will be a minimum pitch point of 8. Amendment 2 also added that this description must demonstrate the offeror's commitment to the shared service model. And so that is an addition to the previous statement. So we added that the offers must demonstrate the offeror's commitment to the shared service model. It also must demonstrate the totality of the requirements described in the performance work statement. And the vendors must demonstrate in sufficient detail an understanding of the government's needs and how the offeror intends to provide the following services over the 15-year IT contract. So the offerors must describe their service management, service strategy, service delivery at implementation, and their service delivery at solution management in this volume. And so this volume will be evaluated in accordance with Section M. I do want to point out that this is the volume where offerors may provide an administrative cover letter with their GDS, their pseudo city code, and their International Air Transport Association, which is also known as the ATA, that number that the offer will be using if they plan on proceeding to phase 2 of the evaluations. So that's cover letter must have that if you all want us to, if you're going to plan on proceeding to phase 2. So this information, it will not be used for phase 1 evaluation purposes though, but it allows us to set the stage up for phase 2. The government will use this information in the administrative cover letter to load potential demonstration hotel and airline rates to the specified pseudo city codes. I have had offers send me questions and go ahead and send me their pseudo city codes, but the codes will must be provided in that administrative cover letter if you so choose to add them. And they will all get loaded at the same time to provide for fair opportunity. Okay, volume 2 is the T&E managed service description. So this volume does not have a page limitation for the volume itself. But what I do want to point out is that previous slide with the J3 requirements traceability matrix, that actually has a 2,300 character limit, which is equal to about a half a page per each item. So when we looked at column J, which has the vendor comments, For each one of those rows, you can provide a comment on everything that you want, but the limitation size for each row is going to be 2,300 characters, which is about a half a page narrative. So that is for element 4BIII. So with the T&E Technology Managed Service description, this volume must demonstrate the service and solution architecture. It must also demonstrate the offer's FedRAMP status and must complete the CSCRM basic safeguarding questionnaire, which it also needs to do 508 compliances, and then also has to complete the voluntary product accessibility template. So please note that in Solicitation Amendment 2, the basic safeguarding questionnaire was originally called the CSCRM questionnaire. So in Amendment 2, we corrected that questionnaire to state the basic safeguarding questionnaire, which is in alignment with the rest of the RFP. So there were some confusions about that and questions were asked. So we made sure that we tied the appropriate CSCRM basic safeguarding questionnaire to this section. We do have a question that says, can GSA please confirm the updated pitch used for graphics also includes tables? Yes, we can do a minimum pitch of 8 for tables as well. And I will take that and update that with our next solicitation amendment coming out. So yes, it can be a minimum of 8 as well. Okay, you're welcome. All right, so volume 3, the small business subcontracting. Volume 3 has a limitation of 10 pages. And of course, the same thing. We did an update in solicitation amendment 2 that allowed for the pitch point size for graphics and images, and we'll update that to include tables to have a minimum pitch point of 8. So with this volume, we are asking for offerers to describe how small businesses will play an active role throughout the life of this contract. And it will also include an overview of the offerer's commitment to small businesses under similar contracts. So offerers, you must identify specific small businesses that meet one or more socioeconomic categories. You must have enforceable commitments with the identified small businesses and must demonstrate corporate commitments to all types of small businesses, either through successful partnering under similar contracts or through participation in federal agency small business mentor protege programs, or anything you so fit, but we must describe that. Please note, we are not asking at this time for vendors to complete that attachment J16, which is the subcontracting plan template. That will occur to the awarded contractor only, and it'll be something that will come into place once we have the awarded contract. But as outlined and just described, that is what you need to provide in volume 3. It's everything besides that. Okay, so volume 4, past performance. So volume 4 does have a limitation of 15 pages, which is 5 pages per reference. Again, we updated amendment 2 to do the pitch point size for graphics and images, and will add tables to the mix to have a minimum pitch point of 8. So with this volume, offers must provide past performance reference information that is current, which means no more than 3 years old. So if offers are due on January the 31st, 2024, no more than 3 years old as of January the 31st, 2024. Please make sure that your past performance volume includes your customer's organization, your customer's primary point of contact, secondary point of contact to include email, contract number, value, duration, period of performance, begin and end date. The past performance volume must also describe the following. Now, this is going to be a little bit more information, but I want to make sure everybody has it. They must provide a T&E technology managed service or solution with at least 3 clients that have global business process complexity and also large travel volumes, and why an offerer thinks this particular customer is comparable to the government's requirements. So the past performance must describe what the requirements were, their implementation approach, their supporting data and API interfaces, the management of the effort. The past performance volume must also identify performance metrics and reporting used to measure the offer's performance of the technology infrastructure, implementation, operations, and tech support services, as well as the quality. And then finally, the offer must discuss challenges encountered and how they were resolved. Okay, and then finally, the price volume 5. So this volume does not have a page limitation. The price volume will include an administrative cover letter that identifies the offeror's company name, address, SAM unique entity identifier or UEI, business size, and point of contact. Please also put on your administrative cover letter your authorized officials who are authorized to negotiate and authorized for signature authority for a contract from your company. And then the cover letter will also have the reps inserts completed via sam.gov. So you can save the reps inserts off of sam.gov or state that the reps inserts have been updated via sam.gov through the SAM UEI. One item to note, and that we did add in Solicitation Amendment 2, is that all offers must have an active SAM UEI throughout the life of the solicitation, the evaluation, and the award process. So please do not let your SAM entity expire for even one day, because if you have an unexpired for one day, it kind of kicks you out of the competition. So please keep and make sure that your UEI is up to date throughout the entire life of this solicitation up through award. The price volume will also include the completion of the SF 1449, the completion of the SF 30 solicitation amendments, and it will also include a pricing narrative that describes the complete cost to perform the stated requirements, and a narrative that describes all pricing assumptions. We have had several questions regarding pricing and if the offeror were to propose additional items. Please note this pricing schedule that we have submitted in our RFP is set, but if you do have some additional pricing assumptions or line items that you want to include additionally, this is where you would put it. You'd put it in your pricing volume 5 in its own section. The government will review anything that is additional and determine fair and reasonableness or the course of action for that piece. But we need to make sure that you do not adjust the CLIN schedule. It is what it is. Does anybody have any questions before we move on for section L? I know that was a lot of information. Okay, let's go ahead and move forward to the next slide. Okay, so this is the acquisition timeline. This is the overview of the overall acquisition timeline in visual format. You'll see that phase 1 submissions are due January the 31st, 2024. Phase 1 evaluations will occur in February and in March, with an advisory notice being sent no sooner than March the 31st, 2024. It could be sent out later, but it'll definitely not be sent out before March the 31st, 2024. So then phase 2 demonstrations will occur around June 2024, with an apparent awardee notice occurring sometime around early September 2024. So once an apparent awardee is notified, then the apparent awardee only will go through the solution verification and C-SCRIM checks. And then that'll occur in September 2024, with the final award notification hopefully around early November 2024. So this is the life cycle of this entire procurement and when to expect things. Does anybody have any questions on this? Okay, let's move forward to the next slide then. And again, if you have questions at the end, we will have a Q&A period. If we missed your appropriate time, we can always address things at the end. Okay, so now we're at section M. Section M actually underwent the biggest structural change across the solicitation. So please note, if you have not looked at Solicitation Amendment A00002, please go to sam.gov and get that information downloaded, because section M went through the biggest structural change across the solicitation. I want to emphasize that we did streamline the evaluation criteria. We did not change the volumes that are listed in section L or what is required in each volume. However, we did simplify the evaluation criteria to be more easier to understand. The original section M was overly complicated and potentially constraining. So it did imply that the government intended to rate each element under the volumes and not the volume as a whole. So that was not the intent of the government. The intent of the government was to rate the volumes overall themselves. So Solicitation Amendment A2 corrects this. It takes out the impression that each element will be rated and is focused simply on the volumes. Offers still must provide all of the items listed under each volume to make sure that you produce the best proposal possible. And it also, the government will then evaluate the offers volumes as a whole and will document the strengths, weaknesses, and deficiencies to determine the rating for a volume. It also breaks each volume out as its own factor. So where the original solicitation had evaluation methodology that had volumes 1 and 2 going together and volumes 3 and 4 going together, Solicitation Amendment A2 broke out each volume to where each volume will have its own factor rating. Now, with that said, this right here is a visual of how the process looks. And Elizabeth, if you can do me a favor and unshare your screen, I'm going to share mine and go over a few items in M2. So let me share my screen real quick. Okay, so let's go back to solicitation at the very beginning of M. If you notice that most of the sections, oh, hold on, it's not shared fully. Can you see now?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'm not used to Zoom, so I do apologize for that. Okay, so if you look, sections M02 are highlighted red. Please note that if it's highlighted red, the entire section has changed, which the majority of section M did change as a whole. So I didn't want to highlight everything all red and then it just looked like this big red section. So we just went ahead and to make it easier to read, just highlighted the section headers that changed. Give me just 1 second. My Zoom shifted over and I have to move it. Okay, so section M2 describes the general how you will be rated. And only the section headers, like I said, that were highlighted red were bolded and highlighted to keep things easier to read. So in section M, the general approach to how an offer is to be evaluated is described. So the definitions have been added for significant strengths, weaknesses, significant weaknesses, and deficiencies so that the industry knows what each definition will mean. Over in section M3, you will see that remained the same, but it describes the process for an advisory multi-phase evaluation. So the offers who are rated most highly will be advised to proceed to the next phase of the procurement. So that's when the notification to all phase 1 offers will be sent out. And there will be a notification if the government recommends you moving forward to phase 2, or if the government does not recommend you to move on to phase 2. So what I want to point out though is this is an advisory down select. So this advice is recommendation only. So each offer will have 10 days to notify the government if they want to continue to participate in phase 2. And once that 10-day window passes, then you're either in phase 2 or you're not. There will not be any formal debriefings from phase 1 to phase 2. Formal debriefings will actually occur at the apparent awardee stage. So let me move on to section M4. Section M4, again, was revised in its entirety. You'll see that the technical, all the factors are broken out to its own factor rating versus combining them together. So phase 1 evaluation methodology clarifies the intent that each volume will receive a factor rating for the advisory down select recommendation. So for this, phase 1 is more important than phase 1 factor 1 is more important than phase 1 factor 2. Phase 1 factors 3 and 4 are equal in importance, but when combined, factors 3 and 4 are less important than factors 1 and 2 combined. So if you put factors 1 and 2 together, they're more important than 3 and 4 together. So when combined with all 4 factors, factors 1, 2, 3, and 4, which are the non-price factors, they are more important than price. So in section M41, phase 1 evaluations right here, you will see that the tables have changed. They've become more easier to understand. So in the tables that are defining the confidence rating for each factor are changed from the original solicitation posting to Amendment 2 posting. Each factor, which is factor/volume, has a table that outlines a high, medium, and low confidence rating. Okay, so you'll see that for phase 1, volume 1, which is a T&E managed service description, has its own rating. Same thing with the solution attestation. On down to the small business subcontracting approach, which is volume 3. And then volume 4, past performance, high, medium, and low. I do want to note that right here is the only change, is that we do have a neutral rating in past performance for those who do not have a record of past performance to submit. Okay, and then another change is in factor 1, the price evaluation. We did add those 2 million transactions and 8.1 million transactions. They did change from the original solicitation to A2. And we went ahead and broke out a table to make it easier to see. So when the offer puts the price in, you can calculate the total evaluated price going on down. And then you will see that these are the CLINs that are not evaluated for total evaluation, but they are evaluated for fair and reasonableness. So you'll see that the T&E managed service implementation, and then for the option year, and then the customer requirements and enhancement for all the years, they'll be evaluated for fair and reasonableness, but not included in the total evaluated price. But you will see right here, here's that CLIN 3, where you have that lump sum price for the implementation period. That will go here, and that will get included in the total evaluated price. Okay. So then we have for section M5, this describes the phase 2 evaluation methodology and provides a revised high, medium, and low confidence rating that is in alignment with factor volume 6. Okay. All right, so the next section is the basis for award. You'll see that that also has been redone. And you will see that the basis of award is as follows. This is everything together, phases 1 and 2. Technical factor 1 right here is more important than factor 2. Factor 1 and 2 combined are more important than 6. And then when factors 1, 2, and 6 are combined, they're more important than factors 3 and 4, which 3 and 4 are equal to each other. Okay, which is repeated here. All right. However, we do want to note something, that if all these are equal when combined, if we have proposals that become more equal in their technical and non-technical merit, price then becomes more important. Okay. So from here, once we're finished with phase 1 and phase 2, we then shift to the evaluation, conclusion, and verification, which we're going to cover that more in depth in the next slide. Do we have any questions before we move on to the verification and solution attestation testing piece? Okay, I know that was a lot of information. So if you have any questions, our question and answer period is still open to the 12th. We will also have an opportunity for questions to happen post this slide presentation. So let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and we'll have Liz share her screen and turn it over to Ryan for the solution verification.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
It'll just be a sec.
Yep. It may look like a lot of changes, but I think it's important to note that the essential requirement, there's no significant changes. So we're trying to streamline how we do evaluations and be as transparent.
That is correct. The overall, what we need did not change. We just try to make it a little bit more transparent and easier to follow.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Ryan.
Okay, solution verification. So Aaron kind of teed us up with the phases. So this is at the point that there's an apparent awardee identified, and that's us saying there's a most highly rated offer, and solution verification is about actually getting hands-on keyboards and validating that the functionality that's indicated as required at evaluation, or that the offer includes other features that they say would be available at evaluation. It's an opportunity for government to check those. So solution verification will be a combination of scripted and unscripted, but anything that's fair game is anything that's marked at evaluation in the RTM or in the proposal that's marked as ready at evaluation. Okay, if there are any critical issues found, that's the red sort of unhappy path, then the verification fails and we would move to the next most highly rated proposal. If there are non-critical issues, the vendor would prepare a corrective action plan that would have to be accepted by government, and we would move on to the CSCRIM work and to final award notice. And I don't think there's anything else to add on here, so we can move on to the next slide.
Well, just want to note that this solution verification happens with the apparent awardee only. So once we make that apparent awardee notification, we'll let all offers that, finished phase 2, let them know who the apparent awardee is. And then, or we'll let all offers know who the apparent awardee is. And then we will then enter into the solution verification piece. The apparent awardee will go through the tests, and then hopefully if they pass, we'll then shift to final award. But if it doesn't, then we will grab the next most highly rated offer and then go through that solution verification with them. We'll make a notification again.
Okay, I think I'll hand it over to Mike Salter to cover the TMC angle.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, if you want to go to the next slide, please. Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Michael Salter, and I am supporting the TMC acquisition strategy for the agencies, as well as supporting the travel management companies that are currently on our multiple award schedule. So this is to give you an idea of what our current approach is and where we are in the process. So our goal is to provide the civilian federal agencies with a flexible TMC acquisition process with a primary focus on 2 things. 1, the offering of assisted acquisition services from our office. Currently, we support all of the TMC acquisitions for the Department of Defense. And then the other focus is on providing a toolkit that the agencies can use to manage the acquisition on their own with their own contracting personnel and information system security personnel. As part of that, we are developing a toolkit of materials focusing on a buyer's guide for the agencies, which includes a draft request for quote template. As a separate document that can be used with that is a draft statement of work and technical requirements. We are also developing a bidder's guide for the travel management companies, which provides a little bit of information from both of those documents. And the TMCs will also be receiving the statement of work template as well. We've incorporated information from the buyer's guide into the bidder's guide that we feel is applicable to the TMCs, as the buyer's guide is quite a lengthy document, kind of covering the end-to-end process for a full acquisition lifecycle. We are including a standard set of minimum requirements, both technical and security, that we are asking agencies that use the multiple award schedule to ask from the TMCs and to have price. The purpose is to 1, simplify the process for the agencies as well as the TMCs by using a standard set of requirements. The TMCs can respond relatively quickly to the standardized items and spend their time focused on any agency unique requirements for mission-related travel management company services. So we believe that this will hopefully standardize and simplify the process to acquire TMC support. ensure that all parties involved, the agency, the TMC, as well as the awarded ETSNext vendor, have an expectation of those minimum set of requirements. And allows the agencies to kind of have a baseline to work from using things such as the current ticketing and fulfillment type transactions that are used in ETS2 today. Several of the services that are included in the ETS2 master contract today, for example, VIP services, international rate desks, and things of that nature. And we're also including some optional services that we think agencies may be interested in using so that they can see what the cost of using those services would be if they decide to take advantage of them. I see we have a question.
We do. Do you want me to read it to you?
No, it said, when do we expect to issue the TMC RFPs? We expect to start issuing the RFPs for those agencies that are participating in the initial operating capability in Q2 of FY24, potentially in February, but no later than March to begin that process. As of this time, certainly subject to change based upon the schedule. Are there any other questions in chat, Aaron?
No, I don't see any other ones.
Okay.
But again, industry, you can come off mute.
Hey, Aaron, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hey, my question with the updated timeline that you just provided on the IOC, where the award is now moved into the latter part of calendar 24, does that impact when FOC is starting, and then hence when you'll start doing the acquisition for TMCs for the rest of the agencies? Are we still looking to have everything awarded by February of 27?
Let me answer the question this way, Roger, and Ryan, please jump in as he's talking about February of 27. So as you know, for the FOC, there are 3 phases of implementation. So what we have told the agencies as of right now, we expect the acquisition process will take approximately 6 to 9 months. Could be shorter, but we want to prepare them for the amount of time that it could take. And we are recommending that they issue their award for TMC services no later than 1 month before they begin the transition process, and as early as 3 months before they begin the transition process, with the work to start when they actually begin the transition work with the awarded ETSNext vendor, so that the TMC is available to have the appropriate meetings with both the agency and the ETSNext awarded vendor. There is work related to attachment J7. I can't quite quote the title. It's the integration document between TMC and ETSNext vendor. But in essence, it's a roles and responsibility documents that is worked on with both the agency, their TMC, and the awarded ETSNext vendor, to ensure that everybody understands their roles and responsibilities in the transfer of data between the ETSNext solution and the TMC, and vice versa. The timing is a little bit different for the IOC agencies. It's a little challenging to figure out the right time to award, so we may end up being a little bit earlier than the 3 months for the IOC agencies. But we are doing that just to make sure that things are ready to go. Thank you for posting the correct name, Aaron. I appreciate that.
No problem.
So does that answer your question, Roger?
Yes, well, I guess also the second part of that question was,
Sure.
Does it impact the timing of getting all this awarded by February of 27?
Yeah, I can
Well,
take
the
that.
goal
So,
is to, Ryan, I'll turn that over to you.
yeah, it can be a little bit confusing. So GSA is buying a managed service for technology, or I'm sorry, for travel and expense. And we'll provide that to customer agencies as the shared service. At the same time, government agencies will each need to purchase their own TMC services. So we're intermingling acquisition timeframes a little bit. But Roger, I think your question is getting to, as far as ETSNext, it still must be implemented. We've been saying about 3 months inside of the ETS2 contract end date, which is June of 2027. So that puts us at end of February 2027. We still need to complete all implementation work by then.
Okay.
So I think to kind of piggyback off what Ryan said, Roger, our goal is to work with the phased FOC agencies. We've provided them some initial guidance so far on the timelines when they should start the process to issue their RFPs so that they have their awards in place before they begin that transition. So that would certainly be well before that February 27 date. And Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe each of the FOC phases is 9 months. So that process would begin, basically, 12 to 18 months before that time period so that everything is in place and ready to go. Certainly subject to change depending on how long the acquisition process takes. We are hoping that by having that standard set of services, again, the ability for the TMCs to have, I'll say, prepared responses for those standard services, and then they can differentiate themselves on any of the agency, unique needs based upon their mission.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And I've got other questions, but I'll hold those to next Thursday when we get together on TMC.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was
and
actually going to mention next Thursday, and Mike, do you want to plug?
Certainly. So we are hosting what we are calling a pre-solicitation conference next week. Information went out yesterday, Roger. So I believe you should have received it late last night. Well, not late, but 7 o'clock last night, give or take. So we are holding a pre-solicitation conference for our civilian agency customers on Wednesday, December 13th. And for the schedule holders on the travel agent services and travel consulting services SINs on Thursday, December 14th. And we will be reviewing the current drafts of those materials, and we are requesting feedback from those participants by January 17th, 2024. So giving approximately a month, give or take. We know we have the holidays in there, but we want to try and get that information and get it incorporated as soon as possible, and see, what we need to do to, make the process hopefully as easy as possible. But nothing's ever truly easy.
Yeah, and with that said, Tim, you have your hand raised. Would you like to add to?
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Mike. Roger, appreciate the question, and Ryan too. But let me share with the broader audience a perspective in regards to the moving parts. You've got an ETSNext RFP on the street. That's what this is about. Bids are due, I think, January 30th, right, Aaron? So that process aligns pretty tightly with what Mike and the team will be leading and presenting next week, Roger and others that are interested in the TMC side of this. But let me emphasize that the first half of calendar 24, which I sort of mentioned at a high level at the opening, will be very focused on tight alignment with the Office of Management and Budget, the Office of Government-Wide Policy, and the federal agencies about tightening up the actual schedules for FOC 1, FOC 2, and FOC 3. So as that unfolds, we'll have policy support for that. We'll have agency concurrence for that. And that will sort of tighten up the schedules that will align with what should remain the target of February of 27 for your full implementation and deployment. I hope that helps a little bit.
Okay, if there are Aaron, if there are no further questions in the chat, I'll turn it back to you and your team.
No further questions. So with that said, let's
the one thing I will say, I'll just say, if you want to provide our email address, it can put it in the chat. It is tmcstrategy@gsa.gov. And if anyone has any questions, we're more than happy to answer those via that email. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. With that said, we'd like to turn it over to our ISSO, Tay Kim. Tay?
Thanks, Aaron. Could you bring up the next slide, please? Oh, perfect. Thank you. So as it was mentioned earlier in the presentation, that the expectation is that the ETSNext solution is going to be a cloud-based offering. And as such, under the federal regulations, any cloud offerings will require a FedRAMP authorization to handle the production data. And based on the information types that'll be handled by the system, it's been determined that it will be a FedRAMP moderate. So from the offerer's perspective, you're going to want to focus and describe your experience with achieving any federal government security compliance, such as FedRAMP or FISMA, that they have any experience with in the past, any solutions that they managed. And, it may even be possible that your solution that you are, bidding with already has a FedRAMP ATO, which would be great. But we've anticipated that there are going to be offerers who do not already have a FedRAMP authorization for their solution. And in those scenarios, we're looking to utilize a process. It's essentially a FedRAMP Lite that's been developed within GSA called MISAS, or the Moderate Impact Software as a Service authorization. And it focuses on a subset of the most critical of the NIST 853 security controls. And those of you who've dealt with federal security compliance will know that document intimately. And as part of the MISAS authorization, those subset of the critical controls from there that's been defined under MISAS will be assessed to obtain the authorization, making sure that those specific controls are sufficiently implemented. And as mentioned, the objective for having the MISAS initially prior to achieving FedRAMP authorization, and it's basically a phased approach essentially. So you're receiving the MISAS ATO first, which covers some of the controls that are already required under FedRAMP. And that is to facilitate the initial operating capability phase of the implementation. And so the offer is expected to have the MISAS ATO before the IOC is fully implemented and utilizing production data for those specific agencies. And ultimately, the expectation is, one, to achieve the MISAS ATO within 9 months of award, and then subsequently obtain the FedRAMP ATO for full operating capability 12 months after the MISAS award. Now, if your solution already has FedRAMP authorization, that's great. And what we'd be expecting in terms of the information to provide is, how will your solution achieve, if you haven't already achieved FedRAMP, we want to see how are you going to go about achieving the FedRAMP ATO, within 12 months of the MISAS award. And for those of you who are maybe don't have FedRAMP award already, but you're already on the path to achieving FedRAMP, and you've taken some of the critical steps to achieving FedRAMP authorization, then the focus of what you want to describe is going to be what are those key milestones in the FedRAMP authorization process that you've achieved, such as the documentation, various types of documentation that are required, or if you've achieved the assessment, things like that, or if you've already had your FedRAMP PMO review. And for those who are not FedRAMP, that are not already FedRAMP authorized, again, you want to focus on clearly defining what's within your system boundary, to show where the data flows are going within the various components that are handling the CUI and PII. And if any of those components are already FedRAMP authorized, so maybe your overall solution isn't FedRAMP authorized, but the components, or maybe even your underlying infrastructure, you're hosting in a FedRAMP authorized cloud environment, such as AWS. Again, clearly defining what the different components and the infrastructure components that are authorized and already documented in the FedRAMP marketplace will be beneficial as part of your overall ETSNext system boundary. And then clearly also identifying any external interconnections outside of the system boundary that you'll be leveraging where you have data flow going outside of the system boundary. And for regardless of whether they're internal or external, if you are using any integrations that do not have federal authorization, an important part will be to identify if any of those components have non-federal security accreditations using frameworks such as PCI or ISO or SOC 2, and also demonstrate how the controls that are independently assessed under those frameworks map to some of the key NIST 853 controls that's required for the FedRAMP ATO. So that would definitely help in terms of GSA, evaluating the vendor's security posture, since at the time of evaluation, the security team is not going to have the benefit of reviewing your detailed security plans and being able to do that deep dive at that point. And so relying on other independent assessments will be beneficial. And then finally, it was mentioned earlier, the RTM and the functional requirements of the solution. And so there is a whole security tab in the RTM. And so you want to make sure that you address those specific requirements, and also the specific timelines in terms of when those specific requirements can be addressed. And finally, what we've described here, I mean, these are all key elements as part of the solution attestation. And so you want to make sure that you've got that prepared and submitted as a whole. If you could go to the next slide, please. So I did mention a little bit earlier on the previous slide about the timeline. So this shows you the timeline starting from the left, where you've got the final award happening, and then looking to achieve the MISAS ATO within 9 months. Again, that's if you do not already have a FedRAMP authorization or are not already on the path to FedRAMP. So the expectation is you achieve the MISAS ATO within 9 months to facilitate the IOC, and you can see that on the timeline relative to the IOC before production data can be moved over. Now, one of the things that's going to happen, you'll see, is that within the first 90 days after award, we have a number of security deliverables that are due, and that is for the GSA security team to really do that deep dive, which we can't do at evaluation. But once award, we're going to want to see the details to really vet if the vendor can successfully achieve FedRAMP ATO within the full timeline. And you'll see going further over to the right in FY26 that the FedRAMP ATO it needs to be achieved within 21 months of award. And so in those first 90 days, the goal is to really vet the vendor to make sure that they are well on their path or are in a good position to achieve that. And so a GSA will assist the vendor to really achieve that goal. Some of the things that that'll be helpful also is that if you are already on a FedRAMP path, the vendors, you may have completed certain things like the FedRAMP readiness assessment, or even completed a full 3PAO assessment as well too. So if you've already completed those things should be ready, and those are key things that you do want to mention that you have already in place, which will definitely help. And also getting those documents within the first 90 days will help GSA make that evaluation or assessment of your readiness to achieve FedRAMP. And anything that helps to shorten the time frame in terms of achieving those ATO goals will really help you set you apart from others that are also competing for this. So I think those are all important components. Anyways, I think that's all I have. If there's any questions, if not, I can hand it back over to Erin. Thank you.
Okay, vendors, you're more than welcome to come off mute and ask any security questions, or put in chat your security questions. If not, we will move to wrap up. Okay, while vendors have an opportunity to chat some questions, we want to go ahead and, since Liz, you went to the next slide, that's perfect. We did release the answers to the questions that were submitted by November the 15th. That was posted on December the 5th. It is a standalone document and is not incorporated by reference into the solicitation. So it is a standalone document, but it is posted to sam.gov, and anyone that has filled out their CUI cover letter also received a copy of the spreadsheet that has all the questions listed to date and our answers to the questions. And if there were any solicitation amendments that came out of said question, we identified that an amendment occurred in results for that question. So we do have question period that has been extended to December the 12th at 2300 hours Eastern Standard Time to allow for any other industry questions based upon solicitation amendments 1 and 2. Please feel free to send me an email with a copy to onthego@gsa.gov, and I would be more than happy to compile the questions and move forward. Okay, so we do have a question. Will the presentation slides be distributed? The answer is yes. We will have the presentation slides distributed along with the recording of today's pre-proposal conference. Now, the recording of the pre-proposal conference will take a little bit more time to vet because we have to put it through the publications office, but that recording will get posted to the GSA YouTube channel. And then I will post to sam.gov when it does get posted, and the link. The link to the GSA YouTube channel is also on the Q&A standalone document. We did provide the link to allow for you to click on that and see all the other videos that have been posted to YouTube. There hasn't been any specific to ETSNext, but it's a really cool channel.
And just to add, Erin, the slides will need to go through 508 compliance, so that takes a little bit of time as well. So none of it is instant, but we'll get it as soon as we can.
Correct. Will the phase 1 submission be extended based upon the extension to the submission of the questions? We have not received formal requests for extension. Right now, we don't plan on extending the offers due date. We do plan on keeping the offers due date still January the 31st. Most of the information that has changed in solicitation amendment did not inherently change the structure of the solicitation. So I don't see why there wouldn't be, why we would extend. But no, to date, we have not, we are not entertaining an extension for the phase 1 proposal due date. Okay, you're welcome. All right. Ryan, do you want to talk about the key themes?
Yeah, I think as I was going back through my notes, I think we covered these as we went through the slides, but just sort of sharing the themes that we saw in the questions and highlighting that the deadline for questions was extended. So I don't think I had anything else to call out here.
Yeah, and just to recap, we have been answering the questions from the Q&As pretty much all along through the pre-proposal conference. And like I said, really the biggest change in the section was section M, and it didn't inherently change what the offers need to submit as far as instructions. So there really hasn't been anything that's been a major change. We just tried to make things a little bit more transparent and clear. Okay, so I have not seen any more questions pop through chat. If anybody wants to hop off mute, you're more than welcome to, or we can go ahead and wrap up this pre-proposal conference. And then, oh yeah, real quick, we do have the dates and timelines again. Liz, do you want to go ahead and share again the acquisition timeline? Just to recap, proposals are due January the 31st, 2024 at 2300 hours. We don't expect to extend that offers due date because, like I said, nothing's really inherently changed. And then we do plan on holding evaluations February, March timeframe period. We don't expect the advisory notifications to occur anytime before March the 31st, 2024. So look for nothing from us until at least March the 31st, 2024 with regards to advisory notifications. And then we do plan on having our phase 2 demonstrations occur in June 2024. And we do plan on notifying all offers of the apparent awardee sometime in September, early September 2024. That apparent awardee would then go through the solution verification and the C-SCRIM piece. And if all is good, then we'll make a final award. Hopefully by early November 2024, if all goes well, which I do believe it will. Again, we can't thank you enough for your all's participation. This is a great procurement. We've had a lot of hard work from the industry, a lot of hard work from the agencies, and especially a lot of hard work from our GSA, PMO and QMA folks. So we can't thank you enough for everything that's occurred up to this date. And we do look forward for some really cool King competition. Brian, do you have any closing remarks?
I don't, just to echo that. I really appreciate everybody's time today. And we are really excited about this opportunity. As I started off saying, this is sort of a lot of things are coming together for us to do something important for government travelers. And we need partnership with industry to get this done and accomplish this mission. So excited to hear from everybody and get moving on this. So thank you again.
All right, with that said, we'll go ahead and end the recording. And then you all have a wonderful day. I'll go ahead and secure the chat comments so that I have my Q&As, Liz, and then we should be good to go.
Sure, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.